Can the Miami Heat get a much-needed win before the All-Star break, or will a stomach virus ruin their chances?
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. Whether you're tuning in on YouTube or your favorite podcast app, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm Wes Goldberg, credentialed Heat media member who covers this team every day. I have a great show for you today. We're going to talk about a stomach virus that keeps taking out different Miami Heat players, including a new one for tonight's game in Dallas. We'll also get to some of your leftover listener questions from last night's post-game show. But before we jump in, we want to announce the next Locked On Heat watch party, February 28th at the Taurus in Coconut Grove for the Heat's game against the Pacers. Tip-off is at 8 p.m. Come watch us. Come watch the game with us. Hang out with us. Take advantage of an extended happy hour, signature cocktails, great food, and so much more. Hopefully a Heat win. We're looking forward to seeing you there. Before we jump into tonight's preview, Heat Mavericks 8:30 p.m. tip-off. Before we jump into that, want to revisit last night's fourth quarter. So the Heat blow a 21-point lead against the Thunder, fumble a chance at a statement win against the best team in the league, and they do it by scoring single digits in another fourth quarter. And they've done this now 3 different times this season, and we got a lot of questions. What's going on with Miami in these fourth quarters? Why can't they score? Why do they keep blowing these leads? And what my co-host David and I came up with in last night's post-game reaction was, well, they're missing the number one option. And you look at the things that Eric Spoelstra is saying and Bam Adebayo is saying after these games. They talk about consistency, sustaining that effort for 48 minutes. And I don't know if that's just coach speak. And obviously, David and I got on here right after the game, so we didn't get a chance to go back and watch the film. So I went this morning and watched the film. I watched that fourth quarter once in full, and then I watched it again where on NBA.com where you can just watch every possession. So I did it in full, and then I watched every possession again. And it was ugly, but it kind of backs up my initial hypothesis here. You look at what the Thunder did in that fourth quarter. There is no question that they dialed up their defense. There's no question about it. They were also helped out dramatically by Miami's indecision on offense. And you look at the way the Thunder were playing in that fourth quarter, decisive, knew exactly what to do. When they got an open shot, they took it. They didn't think twice about it. Where you watch that Heat fourth quarter, and they were hesitating before every jumper. I think they were spooked by Oklahoma City's defense, forcing turnovers. They forced 6 turnovers in that quarter. A lot of them were forced turnovers. You have the unforced errors and the forced errors. A couple of maybe unforced errors, but mostly I give credit to the Thunder's defense. This is, by the way, what they do, right? They force turnovers and they win games that way. They have the scariest defense in the league for that reason. But that shouldn't shake you if you're going to win these games. If you're going to beat Goliath, you can't get shook when Goliath punches back. And that's what happened. The Thunder dialed it up to 11 in the fourth quarter. It was go time. They came back from 21 points down, got it to within single digits, and Miami got shook. And they can't do that. What impressed me so much in that game, for 3 quarters, for the most part, it was like really 2.5 quarters, was Miami's decisiveness. You got an open look, you took the shot. They knew when they wanted to get to the basket. I thought their ability to get into the paint was great. Their ball movement was fantastic. All of that stuff went away. The crisp ball movement, every pass was like a beat late in that fourth quarter. Taking those open jumpers and making a bunch of threes, a lot of that just has to do with being decisive and confident when you take that shot. That confidence, that decisiveness, that evaporated in the fourth quarter. It wasn't there anymore. You clang off a lot of jumpers that way. And that's sort of what I keep going back to, is that lack of decisiveness, that lack of confidence, the fact that they got shook by the better team. And honestly, it's a little hard to blame the Heat. They were dealing with a lot, right? You're dealing with the haziness still lingering from the trade deadline, trying to work in these new players, 2 new starters in Davion Mitchell and Andrew Wiggins, who played really big roles in Miami's first 2 games with them in there. Like they're not working these guys in. They are featured players right away. And there's going to be a little clunkiness with that as you kind of figure out, as you gel here. So I think that's part of it. There's also a stomach virus that is really killing this whole team, and there was a little confusion about who's going to be in, who's going to be out, who do we have, who's available, who's on the plane, people are missing shoot around, like all of this stuff, while having to go up against first the Boston Celtics and then the Oklahoma City Thunder, two teams that a lot of people would say are the best two teams in the league. That's how Miami got to follow up their trade deadline. Meanwhile, the Warriors get to play the tanking Chicago Bulls, a Milwaukee Bucks team without Giannis, and then a ravage Dallas Mavericks team that the Heat will play tonight. So the Heat did not get a good draw here in terms of their post-deadline stuff. But that doesn't excuse necessarily the lack of focus, the lack of decisiveness, the lack of confidence, and the lack of execution in that fourth quarter, because we at least saw it for 3 quarters. The Thunder dialed up, no question. They deserve credit for coming back more than I think the Heat deserve blame for losing that game. But this is what the Heat have to fix, okay? Diagnosing that, this is what the Heat have to fix. It's 2 things that I'm really looking at here. Number 1, the rotations. Well, really 3 things. Number 1, the rotations. There was a period at the beginning of the fourth quarter where neither Bam nor Tyler Hero were on the court. And I thought that put a lot of pressure on Alec Burks in particular. Now, maybe Burks doesn't play at all if the Heat have Duncan Robinson available, right? And if Jaime Jaquez is not dealing with the lingering effect of the stomach illness, we wondered if that was why he didn't play in that game. Sounds like that's exactly what happened. Eric Spoelstra talking about how he's been really affected by it. So that's probably why he wasn't in this game. So maybe Alec Burks doesn't even get this run. But that put a lot of pressure on Alec Burks. It would still put a lot of pressure on Duncan Robinson or Jaime, whoever was in that spot. I think you have to have one of Tyler or Bam on the court, basically at all times. Unless you think Wiggins could be that guy, but you also need him on the court also. Alec Burks had 2 really bad plays at the start of that fourth quarter where he hesitated on a jumper, ended up getting it blocked, and then had a bad turnover because he hesitated on the pass. He needs to be more decisive, or whoever is in that spot. And maybe that's just too much to put on a guy who's on a minimum and on the fringe of the rotation in the first place. So they got to figure out that part of it. The other part of it is, again, this was my hypothesis after in last night's postgame show, was I know exactly what the Thunder are going to be doing in crunch time every possession. They're going to run small pick and roll. They're going to get the ball to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. They're going to have a smaller player screen for him. He's going to pick out his mismatch. He's going to go to work. He's going to either get the jumper or he's going to get to the foul line, and that's what they're going to do. They did that every play in the fourth quarter. Every play. I tracked Miami's plays in the fourth quarter. They went through the whole menu, right? Spo went through the whole menu. Davion Mitchell pick and roll. Andrew Wiggins pick and roll with Bam. Bam, dribble handoffs to Davion Mitchell. Bam, dribble handoffs to Tyler Hero. Tyler Hero and Bam pick and roll. They went through all of it. None of it really worked. None of it really worked. And it just felt like Spoelstra was pulling different levers, ordering different things off that menu, and everything, like if you, to use the menu analogy, if everything came in from the menu, when it hit the table, you would have to send it back because it wasn't good enough. It wasn't what he ordered. It wasn't what he was looking for. I think that's part of the indecision, is not knowing where, if you're the Thunder and you're a Thunder role player, you know exactly how to play off of Shai. And I thought that Miami, when the players weren't involved in the action on offense, they just stood around. And that's the third thing here too. Tyler Hero has to be better in that fourth quarter. They don't have a Shai Gilgeous-Alexander who's just this long, big, strong, apex predator scorer. They don't have that. They don't have that on this roster. They do have Tyler Hero, who is an all-star, who's capable of popping off, and who has historically been very good in fourth quarters. And watching that film back, Tyler Hero, when he's not involved in the action, is just standing there. And he has to be a lot better as an off-ball player. And I think of how Steph impacts games. Steph isn't an apex predator wing scorer, big guy. He's not Shai. He's not Tatum. He's not LeBron. That's not his ball game. But he demands your attention because he's always moving off the ball. And he strikes fear in defenses in that way. Tyler Hero, not as good as a shooter, doesn't have the gravity or the respect or the history or the resume that Steph has. But as we've talked about a million times on here, demands the defense's attention. He is drawing doubles consistently. He's getting the best defender consistently. Defenses are keyed in on stopping Tyler Hero now. The Heat have to use that to their advantage. Even if Tyler's not getting the ball necessarily, he has to be a lot more active off the ball. Now, I will say this. He was coming back from a stomach illness. My guess, considering that we've seen Tyler Hero tap into that this season a lot, my guess is that he ran out of gas in the fourth quarter, as did the rest of the Heat. And he just didn't have it in him to be running off the ball Steph Curry style. But that's what he needs to do. And when I think about Miami's fourth quarter offense going forward, I want to see more of that. I want to see Bam initiating. I want to see Wiggins as a secondary playmaker. You can run pick and roll and that kind of stuff. But I need whatever's happening in the middle of the court, the other guys need to be more involved, and specifically Tyler Hero has to be constantly moving off the ball. And when you have that, you're creating confusion, split cuts, off-ball actions, running splash action in the corner, Miami's favorite action that they've been using for years, dating back to the PJ Tucker season. All that stuff. You got to use all of it at your disposal. But the common theme in all of that, the common denominator in all of that, Tyler Hero going crazy off ball, running around, all these things. If that means he doesn't play the entire fourth quarter, that's okay. If he comes in for 8-9 minutes in the fourth quarter, make sure that and just runs wild for those 8 or 9 minutes, I think that would work. And by the way, that's what Steph does in Golden State. They don't play him usually the entire fourth quarter, but when he comes in, he dials it up. The Heat dialed it down last night while the Thunder dialed it up. And that was the biggest difference to me. And that's why the score disparity was so wide. The Heat dialed it down. The Thunder dialed it up. The Heat need to be consistently dialing it up in those fourth quarters. I know it's a lot to ask, especially with the stomach virus and everything, but that's what it's going to require if the Heat are going to make sure that they're overcoming these fourth quarter concerns, especially against better teams. Speaking of the stomach virus, got our latest updates. Who's going to be available for tonight's game in Dallas? That's coming up next here on Locked On Heat. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. A reminder that your favorite NBA team is a free daily newsletter. Introducing the Locked On Heat newsletter, one stop for ultimate Heat and league coverage with local analysis and amazing writing from Katie Heindel, Mike Shearer, and Locked On Fantasy Basketball tips from Josh Lloyd. Sign up for free now at LockedOnDaily.com. All right, so let's just let's sink our teeth into the injury report here. It is a doozy. This is barely the Heat versus the Mavericks. This is the quote-unquote Heat versus the quote-unquote Mavericks Thursday night. All right, here it is. So, out for the Miami Heat. Terry Rozier, out with that stomach illness. Andrew Wiggins is the latest victim to this stomach virus. He's out with the stomach virus. Duncan Robinson is probable after missing Wednesday's game with the virus. Tyler Hero, fortunately, off the injury report. It looks like he's good to go. Ditto for Jaime Jaquez Jr., even though from the sounds of it, from what Spo had to say, conditioning-wise, he wasn't there Wednesday night. I don't know why he would be there then Thursday night, but the Heat might not have another option. They might have to play him because there's a bunch of other guys. Nikola Jovic, probable with a left knee contusion. We saw him kind of limping in the first half of that Thunder game. He is at least probable. Unfortunately, Bam is questionable with his own left knee bruise. We saw him also in the first half limping, and they both sustained the injuries right around the same time in the first half. So Bam is now questionable. So that's going to be tough. You add Drew Smith, obviously out, Isaiah Stevens, Keyshawn Johnson, Josh Christopher. Those guys are away from the team on G League assignment. Kevin Love also out for personal reasons for the second straight game here. So the Heat are going to be shorthanded. That said, so are the Dallas Mavericks. No Anthony Davis. No Daniel Gafford. No Derek Lively. No Dwight Powell. They're not even going to have PJ Washington also on the injury report. So they're out of bigs, essentially. They have none. Not only that, Dante Exum questionable. Kyrie Irving questionable. Klay Thompson is questionable. Caleb Martin is out for them. So no reunion there. This is an injury-plagued affair tonight. These are going to be skeleton crews going up against each other in terms of matchups and what that means. We'll get to that here in a second, but I mean, what is going on with the stomach bug, man? It is 5-6 different victims now that's going through. Bam asked about the stomach bug, said just wash your hands, don't touch your face. Like, sounds like he's talking about COVID. I'm not saying this is COVID. I'm sure it's not, because they still do offer the COVID testing, and I'm sure that these guys have been tested for that, since that's still part of the protocol here in the NBA. But I don't know what's going on. I mean, it's flu season. Maybe it's as simple as that, but it is just ravaged this locker room. And so it's fortunate that the All-Star break is coming up. This is Miami's last game before the All-Star break. They need a break here. Not just to get conditioning, not just to get their win, not just to get like a couple days of practice at the end of this break before you start the second half of the season here, but just to work this stomach virus out, get those fluids, get things going, get back home, get healthy, guys. This stomach bug has been messy from Miami's locker room. In terms of the matchups here, hard to figure out what's going on with all the injuries. So the game plan here, I think, for both teams is going to be, let's just take care of business. Try not to lose the rebound battle. Don't turn the ball over too much. Try to make shots, right? Like that's usually what coaches are going to preach to their teams when they're dealing with injury reports like this and the unknown of another team dealing with their own injury concerns and their availability issues. So that's going to be part of it. What I will say, and what I'm looking for here, the two guys that I'm noticing not on the injury report, Tyler Hero, Kel'el Ware. The Dallas Mavericks don't have any of their centers available in this game. This was also the case when Dallas played Golden State Wednesday night, and the Warriors have a young center, Quentin Post, who couldn't really take advantage of anything offensively. He's more of a floor spacer, not really a physical. He's big, but not really a physical presence inside. He was also a second-round pick. Kel'el Ware is making a run for Rookie of the Year. The Heat need to make sure Kel'el Ware is a presence against this shorthanded Mavericks team. And if I'm them, my entire thing here is, can we get to the Tyler Hero, Kel'el Ware pick and roll early? The Davion Mitchell, Kel'el Ware pick and roll early with Tyler Hero spacing the floor off of the wing. That's what I'm doing. Can we get Ware involved, pick and roll, and can we do it over and over again? My challenge to Ware tonight is go score 30. Go score 30, dude. Like, the opportunity is there. Now, Dallas is, like, Jason Kidd, whatever you think of him, he does get them to play hard defensively. So it's not going to be as easy as, hey, they got no centers. They're going to be able to push Ware around a little bit, right? Like, I'd expect Najee Marshall maybe gets the start on him. He's a big physical guy. Omax Prosper, another big physical kind of wing, tweener guy. These are strong guys who can push Kel'el Ware around a little bit because they have the low center of gravity and they're strong. But I want Ware running. I want this team running with pace and then just finding Ware in transition on those lobs, getting it to him backdoor, figuring it out. I want to spam that pick and roll over and over and over again. If I'm the Heat, that's my game plan. Simplify it. Ware, high screen, pick and roll with Hero or Davion Mitchell, and we're just going to run that over and over and over until the game is over. And hopefully that'll be good enough for a win, but who knows what's really going to happen here. And if Kyrie Irving, he's questionable in this game. He went off against Golden State, won the game for the Mavericks on Wednesday night against them. If he plays, expect Davion Mitchell to draw that assignment. Davion Mitchell clearly now, after getting the assignment against SGA, he is Miami's ace perimeter defender. He's going to draw the toughest assignment pretty regularly, unless they're playing a wing. Like we saw Wiggins, he took the Jason Tatum assignment. So expect Mitchell to get the Kyrie Irving assignment if Irving does play. If not, I guess it doesn't really matter. I suppose he'd be guarding Spencer Dinwiddie in that case. But those are the matchups. Again, kind of hard to figure out exactly what's what, but I'd be spamming the pick and roll if I'm the Miami Heat. Coming up next, we'll get into some betting content, answer some leftover listener questions from last night's postgame show. Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. The best way to support the show, like and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app. Tune in tonight. David and I will be on right after the game with our post-game reactions, so make sure you're subscribed and tuned in for that. In terms of best bets here, the Miami Heat, they're actually 1.5-point favorites in this game. 1.5-point favorites in Dallas. So take that for whatever you think that is. If you're betting on this game, God bless you. Maybe get a hobby. I don't know. But at least betting on the line for this. But I mentioned Tyler Hero and Kel'el Ware. That's what I'm looking at more as the player props here. Tyler Hero, 6+ assists, minus 220 on FanDuel. Kel'el Ware, 15+ points, plus 155. And if you think he's going to go off for something closer to 30, you can bet on that. You get better odds. 15 feels like a safer number to me, and you're getting pretty good odds on it at plus 155. I think the Heat will think the same way I'm thinking. especially if Bam isn't playing because he's questionable with this knee bruise. Could be a big night for Kalel. So 15 points plus 155. Maybe put that together in a 2-leg parlay, him and Tyler Hero with 6 assists. You get some pretty good odds on that, but I kind of like the odds for Ware just straight up. So that's the FanDuel best bets. Let's get to some of these listener questions that were left over from last night's post-game show. Jonah writes in, this collapse happened without Terry Rozier, and it still felt inevitable. He's definitely been a disappointment, but can we scapegoat him? But we can't scapegoat him for everything. I agree with that. Like we covered in the first segment here. I do think that the Terry Rozier thing has not been pretty for Miami, but he's not the only problem for Miami. They have a lot of other things that they have to figure out. And this is, by the way, Tyler Hero working off the ball. This is why Terry Rozier was a part of the rotation. The Heat believe that Tyler Hero can't be on the ball all the time. And that's how they figured that they were going to get him off the ball, is by playing him with a more natural point guard like Rozier. Now they have Davion Mitchell. They don't have to do that. They can give that role to Davion Mitchell. I would argue maybe Bam should play that role a little bit more. I thought Miami's, sort of I think the best version of Miami's offense is when Bam is handling the ball up high. And you've got Tyler Hero and Duncan Robinson running split cuts and coming around screens around Kel'el Ware on the other end. I'd like to see them get back to some of that too. Max writes in, why does this team struggle to play with the lead? Seems like it's been a problem for the past 3 years. I've heard this a lot. We talk about these independent fourth quarter collapses and these 3 occasions where they score in double digit or in single digits rather. But the fourth quarter thing has been an issue, and I think you have 2 different things here. I think you have the Jimmy Butler era and then now and then this season really, because Jimmy Butler just hasn't been a factor since January. I think in the Jimmy Butler era, we used to have a segment called Blame Pie after losses, and we stopped doing it because it felt like we were just blaming Jimmy Butler a lot for these losses, and it just kind of got old. But there were games where, look, you saw what Shea did in the fourth quarter. He took over. And I don't mind when your star player is getting guys involved in the first 3 quarters and then takes over in the fourth quarter. I think that's what a good star player will do. But it just felt like too often Jimmy Butler would get guys involved for 3 quarters and then disappear in the fourth quarter. That's what the star does, what Shea did last night. You get your points, right? Shea started off strong, got to the foul line a bunch, but really waited until the fourth quarter to take over. So I think that was part of it, was that there was just games, especially last season, where Jimmy Butler just wasn't doing that. And it kind of felt like Bam and Tyler Hero were just kind of looking around, and everybody else, for the record, not to put it on those 2 guys, but everybody was just looking around waiting for him to take over, and it just wouldn't happen. And I think that's why you saw Miami get so frustrated with him. And then you have it now where they just don't have a closer, right? And they got to figure out what that closing is going to be. And I don't think it's going, like, it can't look like it looked for Oklahoma City with Shea last night, when you just have a primary scorer on the ball carving up a defense. It's not going to look last night like Jalen Brunson doing that to the Hawks. I went back and watched that game this morning, where you just give him the ball and he goes in isolation and he just takes care of it. It's not going to look like that because they don't have that player. But they got to figure out what it is going to look like, which is why I like Tyler Hero off the ball and doing those things. Antonio writes, is Spo injured, like mentally? I'm a Spo supporter. I'm a Spo apologist. I'm a Spo defender, whatever you want to call me. Yes, I'm all these things. It has not been Eric Spoelstra's best season coaching. I think that there's been rotation mistakes. I think obviously we even go back to the first month or 2 of the season. There was late game mistakes with the timeouts, and there's been instances where it feels like he should have been used challenges late in games and hasn't. It just feels like the Heat aren't dialed in on the details the way that they used to be. And I do think that that's something that needs to get cleaned up here. Eric writes in, how did 2 top 20 picks in 2025 sound? Kidding, not kidding. Going to make this the last one here. Or no, I got one more after this. Sorry. So for the Heat to end up with 2 top 20 picks, they would have to miss the playoffs. And then the Warriors would have to miss the playoffs, but end up with either 11, 12, 13, or 14. Or I guess you can go all the way up to... Yeah, you can go all the way up to 20. Sorry. So it's unprotected. Their 2025 pick is protected top 10. So feel pretty good that the Warriors aren't going to slip all the way into the bottom 10. So that pick should get conveyed in 2025. Miami, they want to make the playoffs because if they miss the playoffs, their pick in 2026 becomes unprotected. But this is a pretty big draft class. And if the Heat do miss the playoffs and they end up keeping their pick in this draft and it becomes unprotected next year, which is obviously more risky because it can fall anywhere at that point and you risk embarrassment there. The way I will spin it if that happens is this is a good draft and you have 2 picks in the top 15-ish, maybe top 20, whatever. Can you package those picks and maybe move up a few spots? I don't know that gets you into the top 5 if you have, say, let's say you have like 14 and 19 or something. You can't put those together and get into the top 5. You probably can't even put those together and get into the top 8. Maybe you can move up to 10, something like that. I don't know. So that gives you a little bit more flexibility if you're trying to move up and down the draft board. I don't know if getting the rookies in this is exactly what I'm looking for. To me, if I'm Pat Riley, I wrote this for the Ringer. I'm going for the big fish, man. I'm going for a whale. I'm going for Kevin Durant. I'm going for whoever it is. But this team at least has a draft pick now. Last one, Andrew writes in, it feels like this team needs Mitchell and Wiggins to have a summer in the player development program before we see how this looks. I agree to a point here with that. Mitchell and Wiggins are already starting. They are big players in what it is that the Heat are doing. Now, the player development program will be really important. I think Wiggins kind of is who he is. He's just going to need more time to gel. He's not a player that you're developing, right? Credit to Golden State. They fixed his outside jumper, shooting 38% from 3 the last 5 years. I know it's not translated early on here. That'll come along. He's a good 3-point shooter. I'm not worried about that part. When he gets his conditioning and all that kind of stuff, I think the All-Star break will be really good for him. Get settled into Miami, get in the gym, kind of get his wind back, get into the conditioning, and you're going to see him be a lot more physical. To me, with Wiggins, it's just figuring out his spots on the floor. You saw them run him out of the post a little bit last night. I thought that was really good. Get him in those post-ups, get him involved in the action, get him in places that he's comfortable, isolation on the wing, stuff that he's been doing for years. That stuff is not player development. Wiggins is a former number 1 overall pick. Like, this guy has been a basketball player for a very long time. He's developed. He is what he is, and he's a pretty good player. Davion Mitchell, I'll give you this. Defensively, obviously a turnkey ace defender, walked in as Miami's primary perimeter defender right away. But that 3-point jumper is hit or miss. That's the part that the player development can work out the kinks with Davion is. And we've seen him do it. Caleb Martin, other guys, like, walked into this building, physical specimens, broken jumpers. By the time they left, or even just not even by the time they left, even in a couple of years with being in the development system, you saw that 3-point jump shot kind of turn around. Even with Drew Smith, who I can't recall a more broken jumper when he joined the team. Gabe Vincent, by the way, was a little bit like that too. He was not a 3-point shooter. But even Drew Smith was starting to come along before his injury this season. So, yeah, you get Davion Mitchell. He's a restricted free agent this summer. I think the Heat would want to. They do want to keep him. I think they want to keep him around. We'll see how restricted free agency plays out. I would imagine they're going to give him they'll extend the offer to him and they'll figure it out from there. But yeah, you keep him around. I feel pretty excited about what Miami can do with Davion, especially with how much energy and physicality and everything that he's already brought to this team. I'm pretty excited for his future here in Miami. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. Catch the post-game show later tonight. Follow us on your favorite podcast app.